If you're struggling with self-love because you think it's selfish, I'm gonna give you 3 reasons why it's not, and the last one is gonna blow your mind. So I want to tell you guys a weird story about how I started my whole self-love journey, and it's gonna come from a weird place. So back in 2017, I was working as a high school counselor, and I was struggling to make a living. I was living in South Florida, still am, and I was living specifically in Miami. And living in Miami, man, things are expensive. You know, my rent was more than my parents' mortgage, and I was only staying in a studio, and they were staying in a 4-bedroom house. So things are completely different financially in South Florida. And I remember thinking to myself after adding up my expenses and then looking at my income saying, man, I'm just 1 car payment away from being broke, not making enough money to afford my day-to-day expenses. So things were really tight. And it's crazy because at the time, I just had my master's degree and I'm still living paycheck to paycheck, which is mind-boggling. But nonetheless, that's where I was. And I remember one day I was eating breakfast and I was watching ESPN. I remember I was eating and then crack, I totally chipped my tooth. And I'm sitting there like, yo, like, where did this come from? Like, I never had a tooth problem like that. And I remember going to the dentist the next day and them telling me, Mr. Wells, you need a root canal. And I'm like, yo, that's fine. Just give me the bill. But when they gave me that bill, I realized, yo, I need to figure something out because a root canal costs $1,200. That's totally beyond my budget. I didn't have the money. But what's funny about that is that somehow, some way, I did come up with that money in a time where I thought that I was totally broke. Now, where does this story come from? Like, why is this story important? Well, here's the thing. For a lot of people, they believe that they don't have enough money to be able to practice self-care or enough time to practice self-care, but yet here they are spending a lot of time and a lot of money in other places. We want to start to value ourselves the way that we value others or even other services. And this is where self-love starts to get twisted. It starts to get twisted in a way where we think that self-love is something that is not a necessity, something that's a luxury, when honestly, it's probably one of the most necessary things ever. And you're going to see this in the first point that I'm going to make. So before I jump into the first point, I want you guys to hit the subscribe button and also leave a comment below on how you like to show self-love to yourself. I would love to know that. I'll even tell you guys how I do it personally at the end of this episode. So again, make sure you subscribe to this channel and let's get into the first point of why self-love is not selfish. So this first main point, it comes from a story from when I took my son to the doctor, and this was literally 2 weeks ago. My son had an ear infection, and as a result, his temperature raised to about 104 degrees, so it was really, really hot. Now, when we were in the doctor's office, I remember the doctor saying, hey, here's the prescription that he's going to take for 10 days. And he made a note to tell us that he needs to finish this prescription even if he starts to feel better, right? He said if he does not finish this prescription, then the bacteria that he's dealing with, the virus that he's struggling with, could come back. And we said, cool, no problem. And we followed his doctor's orders, and my son, he's totally fine. He's totally good. Now, why does this point make sense, right? Why am I telling a story about point number 1? Well, point number 1 comes from this. Self-love isn't selfish because your doctor requires it. All right, your doctor requires it. This is point number 1. According to the American Institute of Stress, 85% of doctor's visits all are due to stress-related symptoms, right? The reason why you're going to the doctor, the reason why a lot of people are going to the doctor is because they're not able to handle stress from work, relationships. Financial stress is something that I saw earlier in my life. A lot of people are dealing with all these things, and because they don't know how to overcome them, they actually find themselves even more in debt because they have to go to a doctor, because they have to take time off, right? You want to take care of yourself in a way that a doctor is telling you to take care of yourself. And that comes from practicing self-love. Self-love is going to be a thing. It's going to be the best medicine actually that you can take at this moment. And I cannot have you guys skipping this because you feel like it's selfish. A lot of people struggle with the art of saying no. Here's the beautiful thing about saying no. It doesn't need a reason. And the reason why is because it is a full sentence. A lot of people think that the word no is incomplete and they need to add more reasoning to their answer, but you do not. When you tell people no, that you can't go out, can't loan them money, can't do them a favor, it should be accepted as such. And if the person asks them why, you can also tell them, I just don't feel like it. That is also a full sentence, believe it or not. A lot of times people just struggle with the art of saying no because they think that they're going to lose a best friend. They think that they're being mean. They think they're being selfish. But that is not the case because self-love, protecting your time, protecting your energy is one of the most important things, because if not, you're going to find yourself in the doctor's office asking for help because you haven't been able to manage your stress. Point number 2 that I want to make why self-love isn't selfish comes from the golden rule. Okay, so point number 2, you can write this down, the golden rule. And the golden rule simply states that you should treat others the way that you want to be treated. Now, here's the thing. Right now, you treat others really well. You've loaned them money, you've given them offers, right? Like whether it's, let's say, volunteering to help them, let's say, pack up and move or something like that, right? Like you've offered not only that, but gifts. You've been a real nice person to a lot of people. But the thing is, you're not being that way to yourself. So again, the way you treat others is the way that you should treat yourself. So if you notice that you've been loaning money, giving gifts, doing favors, doing all these things for other people, ask yourself, why aren't you doing this for you? And that's a serious question I want to know from you guys. Why is it that you can be so nice, so giving to others, but when it comes to you, you're stingy with it, right? You start to alligator arm it, as they say. Well, the reason why is because you feel like you don't deserve these things. You think that it's being selfish. You think, I'll get to me later because these people need me at this moment. Here's the thing, guys. A lot of people on this earth, they have the ability. They have everything within them to actually solve their problems and overcome a lot of their obstacles in their life. Trust me, that's a therapy that I do practice. But a lot of people feel as though if they don't help them, then this person will never solve their problems. And as a result, their blood is going to be on your hands. And that is not true. Trust me, these people in your life, they have the wherewithal, they have the resiliency within them to overcome the things that they're struggling with. We just have to trust that they have it. And here's the thing, I wasn't even planning to put this into this podcast, but one of the best things you can do is allow people to figure things out on their own. When you do that, you teach a man or a woman, right, how to fish rather than giving them fish. And we all know the purpose of that. So again, I need you to treat yourself the way that you've been treating others. And I want you to start that today. So the third point, and I'm so glad that you guys made it this far, it says that you really love this content and I appreciate it. But also it shows that you learned something, because you wouldn't have made it this far unless you felt like you weren't learning something. So the third point as to why self-care isn't selfish is all because you'll show up as your best self when you love yourself. I want you guys to think about this, especially if you're in a service-based industry, right? So whether you're a dentist, a therapist, you could be a teacher, you could be a police officer, a lawyer, like whatever the case it may be. I want you guys to think, or I want you guys to ask yourself, am I doing right by people when I give them only 50% of my energy? Now, here's the thing. If you're consistently doing that, you're doing them a disservice, but also you're doing yourself a disservice because you're not allowing your full talents to be shown. Me as a therapist, I have a solid rule. I don't see clients before 10 a.m. And that is structured so that I have the energy to focus on me, so now I can give to other people. Another rule that I have is that I don't work on Tuesdays. Tuesdays is a day where I rest. It's a day where I work on my business. And it's a day to do things that I want to do. And then I don't need a reason to do that. It's just because I want to. And it's the same thing that you guys can do when you set those boundaries. But here's the thing. If you do not do that, you run the risk of showing up as half yourself, 50% of yourself, being consistently subpar. And one can make the argument that you're being selfish in that way because you're not giving to people at the level that you know you should be giving to them. And the only way you can do that is by taking time to love yourself. So in this podcast, I want to go over the 3 main points. This is why self-love isn't selfish. So the first point that I made is that self-love is required by your doctor. And you can look up the American Stress Institute and it will tell you that up to 85% of all doctor's visits are stress related. And I can't have you guys paying tons of money to see a doctor because you're not taking care of yourself. That just doesn't make sense. The second point that I made comes from the golden rule. Again, treat others the way that you want to be treated. And right now, you're doing a great job with the first part of treating others in a good way. But now I need you guys to take that same focus and start to treat yourself in a really great way. Here's actually something I didn't add in the podcast that I will add here because you're still listening. So I want you guys to add up all the money that you've spent, whether it's on gifts for other people, that you've loaned to other people. And once you come up with that number, I want you to spend this year investing that money into yourself. So this could be in your business, your education. It could be for your own self-care. Whatever it is, I want you to invest in you the way that you've invested in other people. And again, take a year from this date, calculate that money and start to invest it into yourself. And then third, make sure that you show up as your best self. And this is the best way to show that you love who you are and to show that you're not being selfish because you're being the best version of yourself for other people, which is one of the most gracious things that you can do for other people. And the only way you can do that is by giving yourself to yourself, spending time within yourself. So my name is Coach Wells. Thank you for checking out this podcast episode, and I'll see you on the next one.